The rope snapped, and the wagon lurched loose, barrels crashing as it rolled straight toward her stall. So why was the quiet cowboy the only man stepping into its path? Evelyn Carter didn't run when the wagon broke free. Her hands stayed on the blanket frame, fingers tightening against the worn wood as the iron wheel hit a rut and jumped closer than it should have. Men moved aside. Someone shouted her name. She didn't answer. She shifted one peg, pulled the wool taut, and held her ground, like the work mattered more than the danger. Then he stepped in, coat dusty, shoulders squared, catching the line just before it reached her. He didn't look at her first. He looked at the stall, the frame, the way it held, and something in that moment didn't pass through like the rest of it did. Would you have stepped away? Or stayed where everything you built stood? Stay with me and tell me what you would have done. The wind came low across Dry Creek that morning, dragging dust along the main road in thin, restless lines. It slipped under doors, rattled loose boards, and tugged at anything not tied down proper. Folks moved slower in that kind of wind, heads down, eyes narrowed. Evelyn Carter stood behind her stall at the edge of the street, hands moving without pause. Fold, smooth, turn. The wool caught the light in dull reds and worn cream, the pattern steady and even all the way through. She worked like she always did. No wasted motion, no calling out to passers-by. If someone stopped, they stopped. If they didn't, she kept working. A wagon creaked somewhere up the road. A man laughed too loud outside the general store. A screen door slapped shut. Then something shifted. It wasn't the sound at first. It was the way the rhythm broke. Evelyn's hands slowed on the edge of a blanket. The wind carried a sharp crack, wood splitting under strain, and then the sound came all at once. Hooves. Fast. Wrong. She looked up. A gray mare burst into view at the far end of the street, eyes wide, foam at her bit. One of the harness lines trailed loose, snapping against her flank. Behind her, a broken hitching post bounced and struck the ground hard enough to splinter more with each hit. People moved. Fast. A woman grabbed her boy by the collar and pulled him back against the storefront. Two men jumped off the boardwalk, boots hitting dirt, then thought better of it and stepped aside. Someone shouted, but the wind took the words and scattered them. The mare didn't slow. She came straight down the middle of the road, head high, no rider, no control, nothing between her and the line of stalls but open ground. Evelyn didn't move right away. Her hands stayed on the crossbar of her stall, fingers tightening around the wood. The blankets behind her shifted in the wind. Then someone stepped into the road. He came off the boardwalk to her left. Not running, not rushing, just stepping down and angling his body into the path of the horse like he'd already decided where he'd stand. He was big, taller than most men in Dry Creek by a head, maybe more, broad through the shoulders, coat hanging heavy on him like it had somewhere to be. He didn't look at the people backing away, didn't look at the dust, just watched the horse. At the last second, he reached out. His hand caught the trailing rein. Not clean. The mare's shoulder hit him hard enough to twist him sideways, boots digging into the dirt to hold ground. The broken post swung forward and struck, then fell aside. For a moment, it looked like he might go down. He didn't. He turned with her, one arm braced, the other pulling the line in, not yanking, not fighting, just holding. Talking low. Words lost under the wind but steady enough to cut through it. The mare threw her head once, twice, then her pace broke, hooves slowed, breath came hard, sharp through her nose. The man kept his hand flat against her neck, still talking, still steady, until the shaking eased out of her. The street went quiet around them. Someone let out a breath they'd been holding too long. A livery boy ran up, wide-eyed, reaching for the reins. The man passed them over without ceremony, glanced once at the broken post lying in the dust, then turned. He didn't look for applause. Didn't wait. He walked toward Evelyn's stall. Up close, the size of him settled indifferent. Not just height. Weight. The kind of strength that showed in how he moved more than how he stood. His coat was worn at the cuffs. Dust sat along the seams. There was a scar along his jaw that caught the light when he turned his head. He stopped at the edge of the stall and looked at the crossbar where her hands still rested, then at her. "You still standing?" he asked. His voice was low, not rough, just quiet enough that it didn't carry past to the space between them. Evelyn looked down at her hands. The wood beneath her fingers had gone pale where she'd gripped it too tight. She loosened them, one at a time. "I am," she said. He gave a small nod. Not a smile. Not anything meant to ease the moment. Just acknowledgement. His eyes moved once over the stall. The blankets, the frame, the posts still holding. Then he turned and walked back into the street like nothing had happened. The livery boy was still talking too fast, trying to explain what he'd missed. A man laughed again, louder this time, like the danger had been something worth telling later. Dust settled slow over the road. Evelyn reached for the nearest blanket and straightened its edge. The pattern held. No pull, no tear. She smoothed it once more than needed. Out on the street, the man didn't look back. But by the time the wind shifted and the day found its rhythm again, half the town was watching the place where he'd stood. And no one stepped there twice. The dust settled slow that afternoon, as if the street itself needed time to remember what it had been doing before the noise. By evening, the story had already changed shape. By morning, it belonged to everyone. Evelyn arrived early the next day. The boards of her stall were cool under her hands, still holding the night air. She set the first blanket out before the sun cleared the ridge. The pattern ran clean from edge to edge. No flaw, no hesitation. She pressed the corners flat, one by one, and reached for the next. Boot steps passed behind her. Wagon wheels creaked somewhere near the feed store. A man coughed. Another spat into the dirt. She worked. The first cup touched the edge of the board without sound. She didn't look up right away. The tin rim caught a thin line of light, steam lifting off it in a slow curl. Black coffee. No sugar. No fuss. A second cup came down beside it. She paused then, just for a moment. When she looked up, he was already there, standing at the far end of the stall. Same coat, same dust along the seams, hat pulled low enough to shade his eyes, but not enough to hide them entirely. Silas Boone. The name had moved through town overnight, carried from one doorway to the next, spoken like something that explained more than it did. He didn't say good morning, didn't nod. He reached for a blanket near the front, lifted it once, turned it in his hands the way a man checks something he plans to use, not admire. His thumbs pressed into the weave, testing the weight of it. Evelyn watched his hands, not his face. "Wool's from west of Pine Ridge," she said. "Dye's set. Won't run in rain." He didn't look up, just gave a small nod, like he'd heard enough. He set the blanket down, picked it up again. "Take it," he said, and placed 2 coins on the board. Not pushed, not slid. Set down clean. Exact. She reached for the money, counted it without looking at him, and folded the blanket once, then again, corners meeting sharp. When she handed it over, their fingers didn't touch. Not close enough to matter. He took it and turned away. Left the second cup where it was. Evelyn stood there a moment after he went, the coffee still lifting steam between the blankets. Then she reached for it, took a small sip, and set it back down. The day moved on. He came back the next morning. Same hour, same 2 cups. This time he said, "Need something heavier." "For what?" she asked. "Bedroll." She pulled a thicker piece from the back stack. Darker wool, tighter weave. He checked it the same way. Paid. Left. Third morning, he needed one for the bunkhouse. Fourth, his horse had gotten into the first one. Evelyn didn't correct him. Didn't ask why a man who claimed to have nothing settled would need 4 blankets in as many days. She just folded them, took the coin, set them aside. The pattern held. On the 5th morning, she arrived before him and set 2 cups on the board herself. When he came up the street, he slowed just a fraction when he saw them. Not enough for anyone else to notice. Enough that she did. She kept her hands on the blankets, smoothing a crease that wasn't there. He stepped up, looked at the cups, then at her. She didn't meet his eyes. He picked one up, took a drink, and set it back down without a word. That was how it stayed. Days stacked one on top of the next, quiet as dust. Once the wind came up sudden from the north, sharp enough to snap the rope holding her crossbar. The frame tipped forward, blankets shifting, one corner dragging the dirt. Before she could catch it, a hand closed around the bar and held it steady. Silas. He didn't ask. Didn't speak. Just held it while she stepped in close enough to reach the loose bracket. She pulled a nail from the pocket of her apron, set it, and drove it in with the flat of a small hammer. The wood gave once, then held. "Lift a little," she said. He did. No hesitation. She tightened the rope, checked the angle, then stepped back. The bar sat straight again, blankets hanging even. He let go. For a second, he stood there like he might say something. Then he stepped away and turned back toward the street. No thanks asked. No thanks given. That evening, Evelyn counted her coins under the lamp in the room above the feed store. The window was cracked open just enough to let the air through. Dust sat along the sill in a fine line. She set the money in small stacks. Rent, supplies, thread, wool. The numbers held, more than they had the week before. She sat there a while after the counting was done, hands resting flat on the table. The room was quiet, except for the soft creak of the building settling into night. She didn't think about the cups, didn't think about the man who left them. But when morning came again, she carried 2 cups down with her all the same. Out on the street, people had started to notice. Conversations thinned when she passed. Heads turned, then turned back too quick. Across from her stall, Mrs. Hawthorne paused longer than she needed to at the general store window, eyes lingering just a little too long. Evelyn kept her hands moving. Fold, smooth, turn. Across the street, Silas Boone came walking up the road, dust lifting around his boots, steady as ever. He didn't look at anyone else, only the stall. Only the place where 2 cups waited. And by then, folks in Dry Creek had begun to wonder not if he would come back, but how long before something gave. It came on a Thursday. The sun sat high but thin, the kind that looked warm and wasn't. The wind had dropped for once, leaving the street open and clear, every sound carrying farther than it should. Evelyn had just finished tying off a new stack when the shadow fell across her board. 3 women. They didn't come like customers. No glance at the blankets. No hand reaching out. Just standing there, placed careful and deliberate, like they had agreed on where to be before stepping into the street. Mrs. Hawthorne stood in the middle, dark dress. Gloves still on, though the day didn't call for them. Her eyes moved once over the stall, then settled on Evelyn with something measured. Your work is very fine, she said. Evelyn nodded once. It holds. One of the other women let out a small sound, not quite a laugh. Mrs. Hawthorne's smile stayed in place. It does. That's not in question. She rested her gloved fingers lightly on the edge of a folded blanket, not pressing, not touching enough to claim it. What concerns people, she went on, is how things look. A woman alone, working out here day after day, it invites talk. Evelyn's hands moved to the next blanket. Fold, smooth, turn. I don't sell talk, she said. The second woman shifted her weight, eyes flicking once toward the street, then back. It isn't only about selling. Mrs. Hawthorne leaned just slightly closer, voice soft enough it wouldn't carry past the stall. Respectability requires structure, a household, proper oversight. There are places in town that would take you in, work indoors, a position that reflects better on everyone involved. Evelyn kept her gaze on the fabric beneath her hands. The weave held steady, no loose threads. I've got a place, she said. A room above the feed store is not a household. The words sat there. Behind them, a wagon rolled by slower than it needed to. Someone lingered by the hitching rail without reason. The street had gone quiet in that way that meant people were listening without looking. Evelyn finished the fold and set the blanket down. I stand here, she said, voice even, and I make what I sell. That's what I've got. Mrs. Hawthorne's smile tightened just enough to show it had edges. And if the town decides that isn't sufficient? Evelyn didn't answer. Across the stall, a cup touched the board, then another. Silas had come up without sound. He stood a few feet off, not between them, not crowding the space. Just there, hat low, coat still holding the dust of the road. He didn't look at Evelyn, didn't look at the blankets. He watched Mrs. Hawthorne the way a man watches a door he expects might open. She turned her head toward him, the smile returning, smoother now. Mr. Boone, he gave a small nod. We were just discussing, she said, the matter of appearances. Silas didn't answer right away. He picked up one of the cups, took a slow drink, set it back down. My mother ran a place on her own, he said after a moment. No change in his tone, no push behind it. My father went down one winter, broke his leg clean through. She kept the house, sold what she could, took in mending. 2 years before he was back on his feet. He looked at the blankets then, not at Mrs. Hawthorne. Never heard a man say she shouldn't. Silence followed, not the quiet from before. This one held weight. Mrs. Hawthorne's fingers lifted from the blanket. She straightened, drawing the other two with her. Well, she said, voice returning to its practiced calm. Dry Creek is not your mother's town. No, Silas said. It ain't. He didn't add anything else. Didn't need to. She held his gaze a second longer than comfort called for, then turned away. The other two followed, skirts brushing the dirt as they crossed back toward the boardwalk. The street breathed again. A man at the hitching rail cleared his throat and found something else to look at. The wagon moved on. The sound of boots returned to the boards. Evelyn reached for the coffee. It had gone just a touch cooler. She took a sip, set it down, and went back to her work. Silas picked up a blanket from the stack, checked the weave without hurry. You don't have to, she said. He didn't look up. I know. He paid. Left. The wind came back late that afternoon, colder than it had been all week. By nightfall, the temperature dropped hard. Evelyn woke before dawn with the cold already in the floorboards. She lay still a moment, counting the cost of it. Wool in the back lean-to. Dye pots not meant for frost. If they cracked, that was a season gone. She dressed quick. Boots, shawl, no lamp. The alley behind the feed store was darker than the street, the boards creaking under her steps as she crossed to the lean-to. The door stuck once, then gave. Light was already inside. A lantern hung from a nail, low and steady. Silas stood near the far wall, sleeves pushed back, moving one of the dye pots closer to the interior boards. Tar paper lay folded beside him, a handful of nails driven halfway into a plank. He didn't look surprised to see her. "You're early," he said. "So are you." He nodded once toward the wall. "Cold'll split those if they sit where they are." She stepped in without another word, set her hands to the nearest stack of wool. They worked. No talk. He held the paper while she nailed it. She steadied the lantern when he moved the pots. Their hands passed things back and forth without touching more than they had to. The cold pressed in around them, but the space held. When the last gap was covered, Evelyn stepped back and looked at the wall. It would hold. She turned toward him. For a second, neither moved. The lantern light caught along the line of his jaw, the scar there pale against the rest of him. His eyes stayed on her, steady, waiting for something he didn't ask for. She picked up a loose strip of cloth and set it aside. "That'll do," she said. He nodded. They stepped out into the early gray of morning, breath visible in the air. Out front, Dry Creek was still quiet. No one yet on the street. No eyes. No voices. Just the wind coming back, softer this time. Evelyn closed the lean-to door and set the latch. Silas stood a moment longer, then turned toward the main road. He didn't say goodbye. Didn't need to. But when he walked away, he didn't take the lantern with him. He left it hanging there, burning low. And for the first time since she'd come to Dry Creek, Evelyn Carter stood in a place that didn't feel entirely like it belonged to one person alone. Morning came thin and pale. The frost held to the edges of the road where the sun hadn't reached yet, turning the dust into something brittle underfoot. Evelyn set her stall the same way she always did, fingers moving through the work without pause, but slower now, as if each piece carried more weight than it had before. The 2 cups waited at the edge of the board. He came. Same hour. No change. He set his hand to the cup, took a drink, and looked past her shoulder at the street like he was measuring something he hadn't decided on yet. "You'll lose the pots if that cold hits again," he said. "I know." A small nod. Nothing more. He stayed long enough to pick up a blanket, check it, set coin down. Then he went. By mid-morning, the street filled. Wagon wheels cut new lines into the dirt. A mule balked outside the post office. Someone argued over the price of flour loud enough for half the town to hear. Life went on the way it always did when it didn't belong to you. That was when the older woman came. She didn't stop right away. Walked past once, slow, eyes moving over the stall without turning her head. Then she came back and stepped in close enough to reach. Her hand found the edge of a blanket near the center. She turned it once, then again. Her thumb traced the border, rust and cream, offset by half a stitch all the way through. The movement slowed as it went, like she was following something she already knew. "I've seen this before," she said. Evelyn didn't answer. The woman looked up. Her face held something careful, something held back long enough to know how to carry it. "Ruth Carter worked this pattern," she said. "Your mother." The name sat there between them. Evelyn's hands stayed flat on the board. "We came out west the same year," the woman went on. "Brazos first, then farther north. She showed me how to set the dye so it wouldn't run. Took her 2 tries to get it right. Didn't like getting it wrong." Evelyn lifted the blanket from her hands and folded it once, clean and even. "That sounds like her," she said. The woman nodded, slow. "I heard about what happened. That fall. The riders came through fast, left nothing behind worth burying. The street noise dimmed, like it had stepped back on its own. Evelyn kept folding. "I was at the creek," she said. "Didn't go back." The woman's breath caught just enough to hear. "You were a child." "I was," Evelyn said. "Then I wasn't." Silence held for a moment. The woman's hand lifted from the board, then settled at her side. "I wondered," she said, "if you made it through." "I did." Another nod. "That's something." She stayed there like she might say more. Then she didn't. Turned and walked back into the street, her steps slower than when she'd come. Evelyn stood with her hands resting on the blankets. The pattern didn't shift. At the edge of the stall, a coin touched the wood. She hadn't heard him come. Silas stood there, a blanket already in his hand. His eyes moved once over her face, not searching, not asking, just taking note. He set the coin down and left without a word. That was how she knew he'd heard. The next morning, the cups were there again. Nothing different. He drank his coffee, bought his blanket, walked away. The town changed before noon. A notice went up on the board outside the general store, hammered in place with 2 nails and left to speak for itself. By the time the sun shifted west, half the street had read it. By evening, everyone had. Evelyn crossed the road after closing, hands still carrying the weight of the day. She stood in front of the board and read the words once, then again. Order of the Council. Unlicensed street trade subject to review. All independent vendors required to present for assessment. A date. 3 days. She stood there long enough for the cold to reach her hands. Behind her, Boots stepped off the boardwalk. Silas didn't come up beside her. Didn't stand close. Just stopped a few feet back, giving her the space to turn if she chose. "You'll go?" he asked. "Yes." He nodded once. "They'll ask you to move inside," he said, "or leave." "I know." The paper shifted slightly in the wind, the nail creaking against the wood. He looked at it, then at the road. "You don't have to change how you work," he said. Evelyn turned then, slow. "That won't be up to me." "No," he said, "but how you answer will be." The street had gone quiet again, the kind of quiet that waited for something to break. Evelyn looked back at the notice. 3 days. She folded the thought away the same way she folded her blankets. Tight, clean, held in place. "I'll be there," she said. Silas watched her a moment longer, then gave a small nod and turned back toward the road. The sun dropped low behind the ridge, throwing long shadows across Dry Creek. The notice stayed where it was, catching the last light. And for the first time since she'd stepped into that town, what Evelyn Carter had built with her own hands stood in a place that could take it away. The next morning came clear and cold. No wind, no dust moving. The kind of stillness that made every sound carry farther than it should. Evelyn set her stall the same as always. Same boards, same rope, same careful rows of blankets, each one laid flat and even. She worked slower than usual, not from doubt, but from something like measurement. Each fold placed with intent, as if the act itself mattered more than what came after. The cups were there before he was. Steam rose thin into the morning air. When Silas came up the road, he didn't look at the notice board. Didn't look at the men gathered near it, speaking low and watching without turning their heads. He walked straight to the stall, set his hand on the edge of the board. Not leaning, just there. Evelyn tied off the last knot on the crossbar rope and pulled it tight. The line held. He picked up his cup, took a drink, set it down. Neither of them spoke. The street moved around them in small ways. A cart rolled by, A door opened and shut. Someone laughed too quick, then stopped. Silas reached for the loose end of the crossbar. "Hold that," Evelyn said. He did. She stepped in close enough to adjust the bracket, fingers working the screw into the wood. The metal turned slow under pressure, catching once, then settling into place. "Little higher," she said. He lifted without asking how much. She checked the line, pressed the board once, then stepped back. "It'll stay," she said. He nodded. For a moment he didn't let go. Then he did. The space between them opened again, same as before, same distance, same quiet. He looked at the blankets, then at her. "I've got a place north of here," he said. It came out even. Not like a question. Not like a pitch. Just something set down the same way he set his coin. Evelyn didn't answer right away. He kept going. "Land's rough. Not much built yet. But it holds. Water runs close enough. Fence needs work. House needs more than that." A pause. No one out there unless they aimed to be. The wind didn't move. The street didn't change. But the words settled different than anything he'd said before. Evelyn rested her hand on the edge of the board, feeling the worn grain beneath her palm. "I don't leave work unfinished," she said. "I know. I don't move because someone tells me to. I know that too." Silas shifted his weight once, boots pressing into the dirt. He didn't step closer. "I'm not asking you to," he said. That was all. No come with me. No marry me. Nothing that tried to close the space faster than it had been built. Just the offer. Plain. Evelyn looked past him, out to the road leading north. It stretched thin against the horizon. The kind of road that didn't promise anything except distance. She thought about the creek. Cold water around her ankles. The sound carrying across it. The moment she knew there was no going back. She had stepped forward then because there was nothing else to do. Years since, she had done the same thing every day, built something that held, kept it standing, alone. Her hand moved from the board. She reached out, took his hand where it hung at his side, and turned it once in hers. The calluses were there. The weight of work carried long and steady. He didn't close his grip, didn't move first. She looked up at him. "I keep the stall," she said. A breath left him, slow. "Yeah," he said. "You do." That was it. No more added. She let go of his hand. The street stayed quiet a moment longer, then sound returned in small pieces. A wagon wheel turning, a voice calling out from the far end, life picking back up like it always did. By noon, the notice still hung on the board. By evening, Evelyn had taken her stall down the same as every day before. But this time, when she carried the last of her blankets inside, she didn't leave them stacked by the wall. She set one aside. The chevron pattern ran clean through it. Rust and cream. Offset just enough to hold the eye. She folded it careful, tied it with cord. Morning came again. The road north lay open. Silas stood by a small wagon, reins loose in one hand. The horse shifted once, then stilled. Evelyn stepped up beside him, the bundle in her arms, the rest of her life behind her in pieces small enough to carry. He didn't take the bundle from her, didn't offer to. He stepped aside, made room. She set it in the back herself, climbed up without help. When he followed, he didn't sit ahead of her, didn't take the lead in the way men often did. He sat beside her. The reins rested easy in his hands. The wagon moved forward at a steady pace, wheels turning slow over the packed dirt. Dry Creek fell behind them. No one called out. No one stopped them. The notice stayed on the board, catching the morning light. already fading at the edges. Ahead, the land opened wide. No fence yet, no walls, just space enough for something to be built. Evelyn looked forward, not back. And for the first time in a long while, the road didn't feel like something she was walking alone. The wagon rolled on, slow and steady, the kind of pace that lets a person think without being forced to. The town behind them grew smaller, not gone, just no longer holding its grip. Evelyn kept her eyes on the horizon, but her hand rested where it had found his before, not reaching, not pulling, just knowing it could. Silas didn't fill the silence. He never had. He held the reins the same way he had held that horse in the street, firm, patient, without forcing anything that wasn't ready to come his way. Some lives are built in one place and never move. Others are carried forward piece by piece until they find ground that feels right enough to stand on. Evelyn didn't leave because she was pushed. She left because she chose where she wanted to stand. And Silas didn't ask her to follow. He made space and stayed long enough for her to decide. That's the thing about real love out here. It doesn't take anything from you. It stands beside you and lets you keep what you built with your own hands. Maybe you've known a place that no longer fit. Maybe you've stood there, holding on because it was all you had. So I wonder, if you were in her place, would you have stayed? Or would you have stepped onto that wagon? If stories like this stay with you, there's more waiting just up the road.